Okay, we're going to open the session of the Election Law Committee. First order of business would be a motion to reconsider our vote on Senate Bill 75. Do I have a motion to reconsider? Need to go into exec session. Do I have a motion to go into exec session?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second to go into exec session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Question, if I may. Is the bill still in our possession to reconsider, or is this something we would simply do on the floor since it's been submitted to the clerk?
The clerk-
Originally, I was going to do it on the floor, and I've got advice from the clerk that I should take and have a motion to reconsider because there's not a session coming up, so that they hadn't gone through some of the processes that would have taken possession of it.
So, yeah, they
Okay,
gave it,
just for the record, I just think it's important because it's an unusual process for us.
I
to-
think that
they gave it back to us, the clerk's office.
in the future, I think there ought to be a way to have a hearing on an amendment that is not necessarily tied to a bill that can be brought to a bill on the session floor, but they tell me that I can't do that right now, and I try to listen to them.
Thank you,
All right.
Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the clarification.
So, the question is do I have a motion for reconsideration?
So moved.
We have a motion to reconsider. Chair seconds that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay. And was that a 3-2 or a? Yes. All right. And with that, we'll suspend and for however long it takes, and we'll have the introduction of the amendment. And Vice Chair. Got that. And Mr. Vice Chair, as soon as you call the meeting to order, I will, and ask me to introduce myself, I won't.
Calling the meeting to order, back to order, and recognize Senator Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is James Gray. I represent Senate District 6, which starts up in Alton, Gilman, and goes down Route 11 to Rochester. There was a bill in the House, Bill 270, that requested to change the districts in Stratford County to align with the other counties and elect the county commissioners by district. Certainly, speaking to the county commissioners, the ones that actually do, put out signs and things, say that it will be much beneficial to them. Certainly, I've spoken to Commissioner Watson on several occasions, and the expense at putting out signs throughout the county is quite large. It also will help to ensure that the various portions of the county, you all have in front of you the map, and you can see that the lower district, and again, I apologize for the map. I think that you got one in the emails that were sent to you, but to ensure that you got one, I took a picture of a screenshot that I did, that the lower part of the county is the most populous, and that some of the people in the northern part of the county feel that they kind of get set aside in their desires for representation by this. This, again, will bring the Stratford County into alignment with the others. The deviations on there, and this is an exact copy of what was submitted in 270. When I put it into the program that I use to calculate deviations, came up with a deviation of 4.86%, which is awfully good, in my opinion. I tried moving a few of the towns and wards around to get a better distribution, and I could not. Doesn't mean that it's not possible to do it. The district that you see in the yellow, dark blue, and then the lighter blue, I believe the way I did it was 1, 2, 3. District 1 would be, deviation would be positive 0.70, which wouldn't enter into the final calculation. District 2 would be negative 2.08, and the final one, the lower one where most of the population in the county is, would be a positive 2.78, which you add those last two together, and that's how you get the 4.86%. Originally, when this bill was brought to me, I had questions of whether or not we could even do it because of the 10-year restrictions on redistricting. I was assured by the Senate Council that this was perfectly acceptable and would not interfere with any of those. It's a good idea that would ensure that any particular city or portion of the district had at least one representative that they did elect, bring us in line with the rest, and be willing to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Senator Gray. Questions of the Senator? Senator Susie.
I just have two, if I may. So, Senator, you mentioned House Bill 270.
Yep.
My understanding is that bill is retained.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so my second question is, if that bill is retained, this would take effect 60 days after its passage if it were to be enacted. What is the sudden urgency to do this at this point?
The reason that I put it in, if the bill even gets a favorable vote out of the retention, then we're into the period next year where I would already be registering people to vote when this bill would more than likely, take effect. So running up against that, running up against people trying to do it, the timeline for doing this and getting it into the next election cycle, very poor, in trying to do it that way. It would be possible if, but why not do it this way and, at least get a feeling from the Senate, whether or not the Senate wants to do it, and then send it back to the House. Certainly, I was told of some conversations in the House that many were disappointed that it did go to for reconsideration, and they still will have the final vote before it would come back to us, because they'll either concur or not concur, and we'll go forward.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Just one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess to that point, it seems like this was taken up last year, which would have been more appropriate timing to kind of look to next year. So, is there a reason we should be revisiting one of these redistricting conversations when we sort of already have taken our votes last year?
Again, there are those that think that Stratford County is better off one way as to another. Since the houses are the ones that did the redistricting at this particular level, that the bill started in the House and they have reconsidered. Again, I consulted with legal counsel here in the Senate before I did anything as to whether or not it was acceptable to do this. And he said there is no constitutional or anything else problem with it, that we are significantly changing how that district looks, and therefore, we would be able to do it. So, I guess, we could say any time would be a bad time, but today is just as good a day as any other.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Gray. Chair recognizes Representative Claudine Burnham.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and committee, for listening to my testimony. I'm Representative Claudine Burnham from District 2, that's Milton, Milton Mills, and Rochester Ward 5. I'm also a current Vice Chair on the Milton Board of Selectmen and a tax-paying resident of Milton for 27 years. I have many reasons why I believe that we should redistrict the Stratford County Commissioner elected position. Milton and Milton Mills villages are combined as a small town of 4,482 residents, providing about 2,777 taxpayers. In March of 2020, Milton voters overwhelmingly voted in a petition warrant article to institute a 2% tax rate in accordance with RSA 32.5. Since our 2021 budget, our Budget Committee and Select Board have endlessly honored our residents with reducing our budget, returning a $1.4 million unassigned fund balance through the reduction of our tax rate, while still maintaining our DRA recommendations of 5 to 16% of our operating budget for unanticipated emergencies. In 2021, Milton's county tax rate was in the amount of $1,203,364, which is about 21% of our operating budget to be added to our town tax rate. As Milton continued to streamline their 2022 budget, keeping under the 2% tax cap during the inflationary fiscal year, the board and the Budget Committee were horrified to receive in October the new county amount of $450,797 to be paid by December 17th in 2022. This was an increase of $247,000 plus, with a rate of 21% more than the previous year. This tax bill was 3 times higher than any previous increase and placed our town office on high alert in the last days of our fiscal year. Trying to set the tax rate, getting it approved by the DRA, and finally issuing the tax bills to residents in hopes that tax revenue would flow quickly before that county tax payment deadline. As a small town, the Select Board are fiscally responsible for the town budget and retaining our staff within that budget. However, with further increases proposed by the Stratford County Commissioners, Milton and other small towns will be forced to exceed their tax cap to offset these proposed amounts, which were set after SB2 fiscal year budgets are voted in. So how much should small towns anticipate in county tax increases when the county does not honor small town tax caps? It was only recently, since this concern was raised, that Milton was addressed by the county commissioner and administrator about the explanation of these increases. We are also informed that our commissioner has been commissioner for 40 years. That was alarming to me because I've never even met the commissioner in the 27 years that I've even voted. So to have that representation finally, and for the people of our town to see who this commissioner was good, and I think it's positive. But by redistricting the commissioner's position, it gives Milton and other small towns in Stratford County an opportunity to have a voice that speaks for them and a face to which a voter can feel confident in voting. Thank you for your consideration in this amendment.
Any questions, Representative? Seeing none, thank you for coming in. Chair recognizes Representative Horrigan.
Thank you very much. I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan from Stratford County District 10, which is the town of Durham, which is actually larger than one of the three cities. And I'm not sure. This bill wanted to put us. Where do they want it? They want to put us with part of Dover and the towns of Durham, Lee, and Rollinsford. And actually, is that even really a contiguous district? Because Madbury's kind of in the way. I guess there's a little tiny bit of Dover out in the middle of Little Bay. So there's like, I'm not really sure if that's a legal district right there. Districts are supposed to be contiguous, but that's a small point. And obviously, the point is they want to make a district with as many of the smaller towns as possible, and that doesn't even do that basic goal because every district has at least part of Dover or Rochester in it. So that's doesn't even meet its basic goal, which I don't think is. I don't think it's needed anyway. I'm opposed to it anyway. I think we should leave it as is. In fact, I think I missed the meeting which was in Municipal County rather than election law, which actually I think is kind of interesting. Probably would have had a better chance of passing an election law, but anyway, there was the only support for it from certain small towns. We heard from Milton, which passed a 2% tax cap, which is nice, and they're concerned they won't be able to meet it because of the county obligation. That's an unfortunate situation, but there are 4,000 people out of over 100,000, and that's a much more aggressive tax cap than any of the cities that have tax caps have put in. So we have always honored the city's tax caps, which are slightly more generous, and of course those cities are a much larger part of the county. As for the timing of this, we just had a redistricting process a year ago, so this should have been taken up. Then. I certainly, I guess the Senate Council had expressed the opinion that it is legal to go through this bill at this time. I didn't go to the municipal and county hearing, but I did watch it on a rerun on YouTube last night, and there was definitely there was concern on the House side that this might not be legal to do so at this time. And certainly it's not a good idea. This idea should have been considered either a year ago, or you can save the thought for 9 years from now. But this isn't really a good time to do it unless there's an emergency, which there isn't. Although there is, I'll get to that in a minute if you let me keep speaking. So this was certainly never brought up last year during the redistricting process. I happen to sit on both the county. I'm an active member of the county delegation. I'm a subcommittee chair. I'm also a member of the executive committee, and certainly this was never brought up by the Republican members. It's all Republicans who are in favor of this. Never brought up by the Republican members last year. It was never brought up in advance of the HB 270 hearing, so they certainly made no effort to sell it to us, to the Democrats, who are a majority of the committee, and probably rightly so, because we have more support countywide. And the cities do get probably a disproportionate amount of the resources and attention from the county, but that's also, they have a disproportionate share of the income. So this was certainly something that's never brought up. They've never brought it up with their fellow delegation members. It's something that just sort of sprung on us fairly abruptly earlier this year in the House, and now it's resurfacing in the Senate. And I think they're actually something that wasn't brought up, something which the previous member who spoke before me didn't bring up, but many members did bring up openly in the House Municipal and County Government Committee, was
there's a controversy right now over a proposal to build a new nursing home for Stratford County, and it's an ambitious proposal. It's a plan that goes many years in the future, and I understand why that goes. Why not every member of my delegation likes that. You know, there's many of my colleagues don't like to spend money. They don't like to plan too far into the future, and this is a very ambitious plan, which was
Representative,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Yeah.
Could I ask that you just keep your
Yes.
comments to the meeting
Well, that
of the amendment, please?
that did come up in the other committee, and that is one of the things that they're probably presumably discussing in the retained committee. That, and of course, actually, in all fairness, even if we'd had this in place last year and elected the commissioners for this plan, I'm not sure whether that particular issue would have been playing out any differently. I'm not sure that so a couple other. One other thing is, and I guess, you know, when you're redistricting, you're not supposed to protect incumbents, so that's maybe not a problem, but you have two incumbents are in one district. You've got a third incumbent, that was Senator Watson, Commissioner Watson, who Representative Senator Gray was referring to, who's in one district and another district that would be open, and that's not necessarily a reason to accept or defend or a plan, but it does create an awkward situation, especially since it supposedly takes effect in 60 days, which, so I'm not sure what happens to those two members who are each, what do you do about that one district that now has two members? So like, you know, you should have, at least need to flesh this out with some language, you know, saying that, you know, the existing, that doesn't take effect until the next election anyway, I think this is a bad idea. I think it's illegal, not just because of it's in the middle of a decennial, not because it's in the middle of a 10-year, you know, period after the census, but also one of the districts is not contiguous, which is the district that my community would be in. So there's many reasons not to go forward with this, and I think the House made a wiser decision by retaining it. And one little thing I should have mentioned from the beginning: this also kills. It entirely replaces a bill, so that effectively kills the original HB 75, which was a very popular proposal, which passed the House unanimously. And I'm sure they'll bring that up at the conference committee. So that was probably not a good idea, killing the original HB 75 either. And so this bill is unnecessary. I don't want to speculate about motives, but I think that motives are probably short term. And also, I think this other smaller counties, all of which are divided into districts, I think they should be at large too. I think it's better to do it for a smaller. It may make sense for Rockingham or Hillsborough, but the smaller counties, it's a lot easier just to have an at-large district for the whole county. It just saves a lot of work for the redistricting committee, and there are a lot of really strange lines drawn, in my opinion, during the process. So
Thank you,
those are some of the many reasons why this is a bad bill, and certainly if you want to think about it in 8 or 9 years, maybe if I'm still here, maybe I'll feel differently. But right now, this is a bad idea, and even if it's a good idea, this is a bad implementation of that bad idea. So thanks.
I appreciate your comments. Any questions, Representative Horgan? Seeing none.
Yes.
Thank
So
you
I don't
for
agree
coming
with what it does, and it doesn't do a good job of doing what it does anyway. Thanks.
in. Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Granger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Michael Granger. I represent Stratford District 2. This includes Rochester Ward 5, Milton, and Milton Mills. The amendment is necessary because it would separate Stratford County, which is the only county that doesn't have districts, into 3 separate districts. The most important reason, so this has been brought up several times in the past. And the last time it was brought up was in 2006. And the primary reason that it didn't pass was because the arguments that were made in the committee at the time made the point that they were all serviced by the same newspaper. That's not really relevant nowadays. The biggest problem that we have in Stratford County, especially in the smaller towns, Farmington, Milton, Barrington, places like that, is the county commissioners don't seem to worry about them at all because there's not enough of a voter base there to make an impact in their re-election chances. And many of the county commissioners, they really care about re-election. McGlaris has been in the same position for 40 years, and he's just recently went to Milton for the first time. Well, probably not the first time, but I shouldn't joke, but he hasn't been there in a very long time. In the Stratford County delegation, we heard a brief overview of the proposed budget, and it was major increases all across the board. And when it was pointed out that Milton and Middleton, both smaller towns, have tax caps, the response was, we didn't know that. And that's a common issue that we're sort of seeing, is like they don't know things, they don't care about the smaller towns because that's not where the voters are. But they're still paying taxes there, you know. And so the basic proposal isn't new, it isn't radical. It's precedented in literally every county in New Hampshire. Starting in 1929, they all started going to that approach. I believe, which one was it? Hillsborough County was the first to switch in 1929. And then before 1980, every county except for Stratford County had switched to districts for county commissioners instead of electing at large. Most of them in the 70s. The 70s was a high year. They all wanted to hop on board with that. You might be thinking whether it's legal or not based on, the redistricting schedule. Unless something's changed within the last 40 years, most of the counties switched on an off year. So 1929, 1975, 1979, those are years that various counties switched away from at-large and to a more normal districted system. And I don't believe any of those were redistricting years, although maybe they did it more frequently back then or something like that. And so I urge you to adopt the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions? Senator Susi.
Just one, if I may. I think you said the last time this came up was 2006. Do you know why it wasn't brought up during redistricting when it would have been the appropriate time in the House to make the change?
So I believe, Len would have been able to speak to that. He's one of the representatives, and he was the prime sponsor of the bill for the House version. And
That's
I don't want,
Turcotte?
yeah, Representative, sorry,
Yeah.
Representative. But, I don't want to speak for him, but if I recall correctly, the basic reason was that since the districting was so time-consuming and expansive, they didn't want to add more work to the pile. I could be wrong about that. He might have a different answer. He would be here, but he's a pilot, so he's in Europe, is my understanding. So I don't want to speak too authoritatively on that.
Okay. If I could, would you believe I attended the redistricting hearing in Stratford County, and at that time there was no mention made of any issue with the commissioner districts, and all the redistricting bills were before us. That's why I asked the question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Turcotte did email over his testimony. I hope we all received it.
I hadn't heard it yet, sorry. Thanks.
Chair recognizes Representative Potenza.
Thank you. My voice is a little hurting today. Representative Kelly Potenza, I represent Rochester wards 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 6. I would like to speak, there was a couple statements that were made from previous testimony concerning that it's only the Republicans in Stratford County that are supporting this. That is not true. I will give you names of other Democrats that do support this, that are in small towns as Lee, Barrington, Stratford. I think that we're focused on a redistricting piece when it's not necessarily about redistricting. Yes, I understand that it's bringing it into districts, but every single other county in the state, and that is the number one reason here. Why is Stratford different than everything else? Every commissioner is elected at large. That means that, of course, that instead of the county being divided by district with truly a fair representation, their race covers the entire county. Stratford County is, of course, the only county in New Hampshire that still uses this at-large voting rather than by districts. The current system is great for the commissioners, but not so good for the people. And why? Stratford County is made up of 3 cities and 10 towns. I'm going to give you an example in the election in 2022. So in the cities of Dover, Somersworth, and the town of Durham, the leading Democrat voter getter had received 8,929 more votes than the leading Republican. By comparison, in Rochester, the leading Republican candidate got 48 more votes than the leading Democrat candidate. In the other 9 towns, the party vote difference was only about 60 votes. Clearly, as it stands right now, you have Somersworth, Dover, Durham are electing the commissioners. That's not representative of the other 10 towns. So that's not fair, and it's not fair at all. So as a state rep, and I'm new in Rochester, you know, at the end of the summer, it'll be 2 years. But I've seen really firsthand how the more attention is truly at the county level is given to the big cities. So the mayors of these cities, for example, they attend county meetings and vice versa with at least one commissioner. But I've yet to see a small town selectman at these county meetings. Why is that? Is it because the small towns are ignored or not informed or kept out of the loop? It seems like that's the case. Why is there such a continued dominance of one political party among county commissioners? That's also not fair. Especially when you consider, and I think this is the point that hits home more than anything else, the small towns pay more than $11 million, a third of the county taxes required to finance the county budget. So why shouldn't they have equal representation? I'm going to give you an example. The proposed homeless shelter. Dover, Somersworth, and Rochester were notified, and they were included in the idea and the concept. Nothing that I am aware of through hours of research from the other 9 towns was publicly reported. The proposed $170 million, which is actually now $139 million, new county nursing home, and that's really kind of where I got involved after I got elected and started to attend these meetings and the delegation meetings. The county commissioner presentation was only given to Dover, Somersworth, Rochester, and Durham. Biggest vote getters, correct? As reported in the paper. And it's silent on if any other town was given the same courtesy. The brand new proposed county solar farm. Originally, this was offering solar energy to just Dover and Rochester. No one else would like some reduced cost for solar power? And the list goes on. This can change. This House Bill 270, which is now this amendment, will require Stratford County to be divided into 3 districts for the county commissioner's race. If passed, no more at large. The smaller towns will finally get their own county commissioner instead of having one picked for them by Dover, Somersworth, or Durham, with their 8,929 voter cushion for one party over the other. This is about fairness. This is about people having a voice. And so I actually have a Excel spreadsheet that I will send to all of you. It's actually from the Secretary of State's office that shows the 2022 election results. And you can see significantly the change on what candidates for comparison and see how this is disenfranchised many people in Stratford County. Thank you.
Questions, Representative? Seeing none, thank you for coming in. Chair recognizes Kate Horgan.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kate Horgan, New Hampshire Association of Counties. The association is opposed to this amendment. As has been mentioned, this bill was originally came in as House Bill 270, has been retained on the House side. The reason it was retained was to give the county commissioners and the county delegation the time to work through any issues, find common ground that they could find, and move forward potentially with the bill next year. We would ask that you allow that process to go ahead and happen. I just want to clear up a couple things. There are other counties that elect district-wide. They may have districts, but every voter votes for every county commissioner. So just to clear that up. And it is Sullivan County and Carroll County who elect their commissioners countywide. I will also point out it is not uncommon for a county office to be elected countywide. Deeds, sheriff, treasurer, probate, and county attorney are all elected countywide. Stratford County is also the smallest county. You can get across it in less than 30 minutes. The counties do not have a standardized way of electing their county officers. Some counties have districts. Some counties vote at large by district. Some counties vote by district, and you can only vote for your commissioner in that district. Some counties have a 4-year floating term that exists. Basically, counties pick what works best for them, and that requires working with the delegation members, members of the public, and also with the county commissioners. We don't feel like this bill is the appropriate way to go forward. If it goes into effect in 60 days, does that mean we need to have a special election? The bill does not lay that out whatsoever. My reading is, yes, we would have to have a special election to redo all of Stratford County's commissioners. The last thing I was asked to point out is you've heard a lot about the tax cap in Milton. For the past 11 years, just to be clear, the Stratford County tax in Milton has gone up less than 2%. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for coming in. And the final speaker signed up at this point is Mr. James Connor. Mr. Connor.
Now it's on. There we go. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee. I'm Representative James Connor. I represent Stratford 19, which is 5 wards out of 6 in Rochester. I'm here to speak in favor of this amendment. From what you've heard from other people, the smaller towns do not get any representation. The county commissioners are pretty much voted by, I'm going to say 2 cities, Dover and Durham. And it's like the rest of the county doesn't matter. You've heard testimony from other representatives that say that, and I feel that that is true. As far as the special election, well, if we have to have one, then we have to have one. It's not the first time City of Rochester had a special election. We just got done with one. So why not countywide? I think it's a good idea. I think it gives more people voting power. They feel more empowered so they can have a say on who the commissioners are. Now, as far as the previous speaker saying, you know, the county delegates have got to work it out. Well, it's not going to get worked out when it's pretty much 2-to-1 ratio. That's not going to happen. And I feel like this is a really good idea. I like how it's laid out, and I honestly don't have an issue with it. And I think it should go forward. Honestly, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions? Senator Susi.
Could I just ask one, you said if you need to have a special election, which one of the 2 commissioners would then represent the district if this were passed? How would you make that determination?
Well, because I know that the Republican that ran, she won Rochester. So I don't know which one of the others would have been out. I'm assuming one of the Dover or Durham ones would not have been elected.
No, let me ask my question again, because I don't think you understood. So right now, the way this is apportioned, 2 of your existing county commissioners would live in the same district. So if this passes in 60 days,
Yep.
2 are in the same district.
Yep.
How would you determine which of them serves as the county commissioner? Because you'd have a district that has none, so I understand a special election
Well,
there, but how would you resolve
It would have to be a county-wide election. So we can see which one of those 2 would actually be the commissioner. One would get it, the other one wouldn't, by the votes of the voters.
If I could follow up, so you're saying there would be 2 elections, there'd be a countywide election for one district, and then a special election for one of the
No,
districts?
I'm just saying there should be a special election for the whole county. And in that district, it would,
But the law would, I'm sorry, but the law would preclude countywide districts. So I'm just trying to get, because there's no contingency language here. This just says 60 days effective. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around how you deal with your existing situation, given how these lines are drawn.
well, then that means like, well, they both would have to run and the voters would have to figure out who would they want. It's just like with the other districts, they would have to have a special election to decide who they want for their commissioners. It would be the same thing. If they both want to go be on the ticket, then there's going to be a primary right there for them.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this amendment? We don't want to take any second. No. Rather not take any second testimony today.
I just didn't want to make a testimony. I just wanted to state that.
Let's,
Close the hearing.
seeing no one else has not currently spoken, not already spoken, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing on the amendment to HB 75.
My mic is off. So you know what's happened. We're going to go into executive session. I will rejoin the conversation, and then we'll talk about the bill, and we'll go forward, okay? So do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
We have a motion, and I'll second it. All those in favor of going into executive session, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. We are in executive session. Okay. Some of the things that were brought up, okay? If you look at the expanded map, there is a connection between the two communities down at the eastern section in there that does, I guess, Madbury or whatever. It does not go all the way out. So there is that connection in there. Certainly, this is not the only way to do it, but as Senator Susi will tell you, that I work hard to try and make sure that the populations are as equal as we can. I was looking in RSA 653 and 666. Certainly, I believe that the county commissioners are elected at the state elections. And since that doesn't change, certainly we can put in a disclaimer either on the floor if it's needed or here that would say that they serve until the new election, similar to what was put into the other bills, if this is adopted and sent forward. But further research should be done on that to see if it's not already in the provisions, because, like I said, since county commissions are elected at the state election, and we are not going to have another state election until, I believe that those provisions in law would take precedence, but, you know, I'm not an attorney. We have 2 attorneys here, and I don't know that they have studied it enough
3.
that they would, 3. Well, I apologize. But, you know, so, again, comments and questions from committee members?
I found thank you, Mr. Chairman. I found the comments regarding the issue of fairness, compelling. Representation should be local as possible and as feasible. The only objection that I found carried any weight in my mind that I heard was, when would the election take effect? The last thing I think anybody wants to do is trigger a special election that's going to cost money. So if we can find a way to make sure that that's not going to be the case, then I would support the amendment.
Further comments? Senator Susie.
Well, you know, as I asked earlier, I mean, we just went through a long and extensive process of redistricting. And the fact that this committee had concluded its business, there's a bill retained in the House, this was gonna get careful examination. I just find it concerning that we're kind of pulling this out at the last minute. You know, I don't know that we've had a public hearing in Stratford. As I said, I attended the public hearing on redistricting. Nobody mentioned doing this, so no one in the public has really weighed in other than today, if somebody happened to know we were doing this, on the configuration of these districts. And frankly, you know, Mr. Chairman, the way they're configured, you could have 2 members from Dover and 1 from Rochester, so you could end up with all cities. And the notion that the towns aren't represented because there aren't districts doesn't seem to work. I mean, arguably, the county commissioner districts in Hillsborough, where I live, Manchester and Bedford are part of a district. I mean, Bedford could say they have no representation because Manchester is so much bigger, it's always going to prevail. It's the population, the way it's configured. I think there are too many questions, and I think we're in too much of a rush to do this today without more consideration.
Senator Perkins Corcoran.
Thank you, Chair. I have some of the same concerns procedurally. I mean, I know the 3 of us sat through many hours of redistricting hearings over the last couple of years, and so that public input is really important, and especially once, you know, we sort of have these draft districts. I know it was always the request to take feedback once they had been presented in terms of how they would play out. Obviously, I share the concern that we just went through this process and it wasn't raised. And so this does feel rushed, but you know, it also is very persuasive to me that the counties do this in different ways. And, you know, there are 2 other counties that elect their commissioners at large. So why we are focusing on Stratford County still sort of hasn't been enumerated. So as one of the smallest counties, you know, it would seem that every voter has a chance to vote for every one of their commissioners, and that's really the most direct form of representation, you know, you can kind of think of. So there's certainly arguments on both sides, but I think procedurally this stands out in terms of what else we've done for public process on redistricting. So I will not be supporting the amendment.
Okay.
Sorry,
Senator
Mr. Chair,
Susie.
one thing I forgot to mention as I was looking at how these districts are divided. At the Stratford County public hearing on redistricting, one of the big concerns was taking a ward or 2 out of a city and then linking them with a town. That, like, universally was raised as a concern. So the fact that we would then be doing it with these commissioner districts, knowing that most people in Stratford County were opposed to that for House districts, also seems a bit concerning. I'm sorry, I had forgotten to mention that before.
No problem. Certainly, in keeping with the 10% margin, there is no way that you can do Stratford County and not split up some of the towns in cities and wards. There, you know, I sat there over the last weekend trying to do something different with this map. I read Representative Turcotte's interpretation of it, you know, that looking at it and trying to do different things with it. Again, trying to get that deviation as low as possible. I think that in this situation where we have the wards, that's the only way that you can get it down. And right now, my calculation came out to the 4.86%, which I think is a very, you know, good population that we did get to. Would it be nice to be able to do the things that we did? Certainly, you know, when we did our Senate redistricting, to try and keep a senator in a district that he was currently resided, we took a ward out of Manchester and did some modifications there. We've done lots of other things. I know I have spoken to Commissioner Watson several times about, you know, various things, not on this issue, but, you know, there is a lot of things that are going on. I was going to try to look up House or Senate Bill, I guess it would have been House Bill 5152 for the language that was in there that, but if we did a committee amendment that said that, you know, this would take effect for the next state general election, that's may, you know, take care of your thing. And then if Senator Susie or Perkins, Cook, or any of the rest of you want to work with me on looking at those previous House bills and the Senate bill and the disclaimer that's put in there, but that we could do a Senate amendment that would say the effective date shall take effect for the next general election. That would take care of a lot of the things that they're looking at each other. Any comments on this side of the table? Would that be acceptable to? Then I will propose that committee amendment to the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I'm still trying to wrap my head around, and obviously, we don't have the language, we can try to look it up, but the fact that we're doing this at the 11th hour while we're sitting here, we're kind of spitballing, kind of concerns me in terms of process and in terms of the people of this county being able to weigh in on it. As I recall, I think we had to do language for Cheshire County because we did something similar where we redistricted someone out of, or were redistricting someone out of their district. But you can't just say it's effective for the general election because the districts have to be in effect for the filing period. Once they go into effect, you still have the issue of a district that's on, I mean, I think it really will take some work to come up with contingency language. I don't think it's something we can do just by ourselves sitting here on the back of an envelope. That's my thought. I think it needs a lot more consideration before we move forward.
Certainly, Senator, I'm willing to work with you to craft language for a floor amendment, but I was trying to offer something so that that you had some assurance that we were not trying to go out and overturn the election. At least I'm not trying to. As for the urgency, a constituent brought this to my attention, and it was recently re-referred over in the House, which would say if those that want it to go forward, that certainly dictated the timeline, not any desire about anything else. If there's no objection, I'll offer a floor amendment, or I should say a committee amendment, to the bill that says this act shall take effect at the next general election after its passage. Do I have a motion to accept that floor committee amendment?
I think we need, because we're reconsidering HB 75, so we need a motion on the bill, Ken.
Okay,
First, before we.
absolutely. Do I have a motion on HB 75?
I move out to pass.
I second. Discussion on, do I have a motion on the amendment? 1552S. I'll move on to pass.
Second.
And I will remake the motion to amend the amendment by having the effective date state that this act shall take effect at the next general election after its passage. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
just want to make sure that we get the language right. Something to the effect of this act shall take effect for the next filing period for the next general election. Something, you know, I don't want any ambiguity, and I would be concerned maybe that the language that you just said might say something to the effect of, you know, people might think it takes effect up at the date of the next general election, which puts it off another 2 years.
So
Senator Abbas, any?
how about
think it
for
should
the next general election cycle?
It should be very clear which election cycle this would apply to.
To the 2024 general election cycle.
At the 2024 general election cycle.
Mr. Chair, I'm concerned we are rushing this, so if, I think I won't be supporting the committee amendment, but if we would like to work on a floor amendment to improve the language, we'd be happy to do that.
Again, I would like to put something there on the floor, and that if the senators would like to work on that effective date or that portion of the bill, I would certainly work with them in trying to craft an amendment on the floor. So the way it reads right now, according to what I've got, is the effective date, this act shall take effect for the 2024 general election cycle, and I guess after its passage doesn't need to be there anymore. Further discussion? All those in favor of the committee amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed?
3-2. All those is there further discussion on the amendment as amended? Okay. All those in favor of 1552S as amended by the committee, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
3-2. Back to the Bill 75. There was a question about the language in 75. 75 had already been included in 83, so that the language is over at the House. And, okay. So, any further discussion? All those in favor of House Bill 75 as amended, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
3-2, and I'll take it out. Any other business to come forward? Move a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And our business of the day being complete, we are adjourned.
Grant was handing